recall last time we left off, we had the saints of a place called Jackson County. What's our big city in Jackson?
Independence.
Okay, Independence, good. The saints in Jackson County had crossed which river? Missouri River. They're heading north, and they're heading north up to a place called Clay County. Recall that we got them in Clay County. They're acting the part of what? Slaves. So in other words, they're acting the part of slaves. They're working in the fields. You would say the most fortunate ones can be in the bigger houses. They're like butlers, maids, some kind of servants. The rest are probably working in the fields. And Parley P. Pratt and a Lyman White are now sent back to Joseph. And as they go back to Joseph, the big question is, what should we do? Zion is fallen. Our great experiment is over. Joseph now prays to the Lord, concludes that he will form an army. What was the name of our army? Zion's Camp. Joseph was promised victory if he had how many men and not one man less? 200 men. So you'll recall that Joseph now marches, and as he now marches, eventually has 207 men. He gets very close to, he's within a day of Jackson County, and suddenly a plague has hit his camp. What's that plague called? Cholera. And none of us want cholera. Okay, if you've had parasites, you know a little bit about cholera, but you never want cholera. We get 14 are died. Joseph now, Zion's Camp, they are all told to go home. He comes over to Clay County. Recall, the people in Clay County say, well, why don't you form a second what? Zion's Camp. In other words, form it again from us. Joseph prays, and the answer is, nope, we can't do this. Because of what? Okay, they didn't continue to do what? Build their temples. Welcome. Okay, so with that, we now find that Joseph returns back to Kirtland. He's big on building the temple. He's receiving a lot of revelations. But before he leaves, you'd say he organizes a stake presidency in Kirtland. So,
when is this?
okay, so our year is now 1834. So by the time he's now leaving to go back to Kirtland, Joseph has organized a stake presidency in Clay County. He's then set apart. Our man to be president is a man named David Whitmer. What can you tell me about David Whitmer? Okay, owns a store. He's one of the 3 witnesses. The Whitmer family way back in Fayette, New York.
Was he already there at Clay, or was he one of Zion's Camp?
David Whitmer was one of those who was in exile from Jackson County who had moved up to Clay. David Whitmer will select as his counselors a man named W.W. We sing all of his songs in the hymn book.
Phelps.
Okay, W.W. Phelps. Notice W.W. Phelps, as time will go on, will write the song always sung at temple dedications. Can you name it?
Spirit of God.
Spirit of God, like a fire is burning. David will select W.W. Phelps as counselor number 1, and he will select his brother, John Whitmer, as the second counselor. John, at the same time, was always also the church historian. So John is writing down the history of the church as he sees it now unfolding from literally way back in the early 1830s until 1834. So as we start today, Joseph's now back in Kirtland. This presidency of the stake is now over than the Latter-day Saints in Clay County. Well, as the presidency, they have some advice. The advice goes like this. The advice says, you know what we should do? Let's take our money that we have earned from acting the part of the slave, whether we've been working in the fields, the big house, barns, wherever we've been, let's pull it together and let's begin buying property in Clay County with the idea that we will be here only a little season, is what's said in scriptures. And once the season is past, we'll just hop the fence, or in this case, hop the river, and we will be back in Jackson County. Now, the people in Clay County, like those in Jackson, they were from Kentucky. They're from deep south. They believe that the Mormons are, quote, po-white trash. In other words, you're up here, you're helping us in the fields, you're no better than our slaves. And they actually like us as that, where you'd say, social-wise, we're more than a step down. In other words, we're not invited to their parties, we're not sitting at their tables, we're not going to their churches, we are definitely a step down. We can't even afford to shop in their general stores. But suddenly, we now take our combined money and we begin to buy property right next door. Well, okay, what happens with that? Did they like it? No, they don't want us. Suddenly, we are on their same social level. We're working our own fields. We're going to be as rich as those guys. Suddenly, it's like we're going to be in their country clubs too. We're going to invite them for dinner. And, suddenly you treat it as nice as your slave, but, okay, suddenly equal par, and their conclusion is, wow, they don't like the Mormons any better than their cousins down here in Jackson County. But the problem is, they don't want to kill us like their cousins had. Remember how they wanted us to line up along here and they were all going to shoot us? They don't want to do that because actually they're grateful because we have added to their prosperity. We have fixed their fields, their fences, whatever. And so they decide, let us have a county vote. And the county vote has to be, what should we do with the Mormon problem? Notice it's not a problem when we're a slave. It is a huge problem when we try to be on their same social level. So the vote now of the county, they gather together their county fathers. And their conclusion is the Mormons must leave Clay County. No question about it. We got to move them out of there. But the question is, where should they go to? Literally, their county fathers vote, and the conclusion of the vote is the Mormons should move to hell. Wow, that's an amazing vote. Representatives, government representatives of the county are saying the Mormons must now go to hell. But then they are still kind of talking, thinking, and they try to decide as county fathers what is the closest place to hell on earth. And their conclusion is it's Wisconsin. Okay, what's an opposite of Hawaii? Wisconsin. It's freezing to death up there. A lot of pine trees that just grow way up. A lot of snow, a lot of ice, lots of wind. We have wind, but, it's tropical winds. But it's pretty freezing, and their conclusion is those Mormons, they must go to hell. What's the closest place to hell on earth? Well, it's Wisconsin. Now, you realize that's pretty difficult. That puts us, for a short season, literally hundreds of miles away from Jackson County, our place where this group is still hoping that they can build their 24 interconnected temples and that they can live the laws of Zion. At this point, a hero who never joins the church comes in and saves the day. You know how you need, they've got great difficulty going on. So who is the man who saves the day? And his name is, good, anybody name him? Alexander Donovan. And Alexander Donovan, he stood about 6'3", 6'4". He was this huge man, and he's an attorney by trade. Okay, so Alexander Donovan. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him and then kind of drop him right into the scene. Alexander Donovan is from Kentucky. So notice he relates to all of these people. Alexander Donovan had actually hired Peter Whitmer Jr. Who was this guy? One of those 4 missionaries to the Lamanites. Good. He had hired Peter Whitmer Jr. to make him a suit. So from the first time that Mormons are in Missouri, he's actually hired then one of those missionaries to make him a suit. So he's aware of the Latter-day Saints. Alexander Donovan, by the time he has arrived then in Missouri, he is an attorney by trade and he owns 6 slaves. So you'd say he fits into this society because he fits into what they're doing. But you'd say for Alexander Donovan, he is an incredible attorney. He has 185 cases before the Supreme Court of the state of Missouri. And you realize it's very hard for a lawyer starting out down here to actually get any case before any state Supreme Court, but Donovan does, and Donovan likes to defend criminals. So I'm going to take you through a typical case so you can get the idea of what kind of attorney was he. Was he, was he a scholar and he could point to documents? And the answer is, oh, no, that's not Donovan. Donovan was theatrical, and he could win over the hearts of a jury. And here's how he would do it. The court case would start, and he would always be on the side of the defendant, which he would say, quote, the alleged criminal. You know, he hasn't been convicted yet. And Donovan would sit there, you know, he'd be flicking at flies. He looked like totally he wasn't interested in the case until the prosecuting attorney would say something stupid. And suddenly Donovan would unbutton his sleeves. And courtrooms would fill to see him unbutton his sleeves. He would just pack in. They didn't care who was being tried. Donovan was going to be, you know, front and center. He's on stage. He would unbutton his sleeves and he would start to roll up his sleeves. And then as the prosecution droned on and said things that were also Donovan viewed as stupid, he would push his sleeves up until they were underneath his armpits. And it was like he was going into a boxing ring. He's going in for a fight. Finally, it's his turn to stand up, and he was noisy. He was loud. Judges would always hit the gavel and say, you know, calm, let's just, you know, keep order in the court. He'd say, order in the court. How could there be order in the court? And it was like he would use all of his energy, and consistently he won. And he was asked years later, is there anything you felt bad about your legal profession? And he said, I was so good, a lot of crooks got off. You know, he goes, I shouldn't have been so good. I knew they were guilty, but they got off, including one man that was being charged with murder. When the jury voted him not guilty, the man charged with murder sat there, and everybody ran up to Donovan, and they carried him out on their shoulders. In other words, we don't care about this guy. We've never seen such a great performance. Well, okay. However, those performances cost a huge toll on the health of Donovan. And the toll was, you know, have you ever had where you do something, and I don't know whether it's so darn scary or you use all of your energy, and then you kind of collapse? Okay, I think we've all felt real tired, you know, after something where you're like, oh, I shouldn't be tired. It's not like I've laid bricks all day, but, you know, kind of the emotion and the strain, and you're like, okay, I'm wasted. But for Donovan, he would actually collapse. And oftentimes, they would have to carry him out of the courtroom, and then he would lay in bed. And he would lay in bed sometimes for days, sometimes for weeks, and sometimes for months. Now, he had married a young woman who was 16 years younger than him. She didn't know how to read, and Donovan said he preferred it that way because he wanted to teach her everything. And anyway, so when she knew how to read, suddenly as Donovan lays in bed, he would always say, read me the newspaper. And when she would read, if there wasn't anything that he thought needed attention, he would continue to stay in bed. Now, I'm not quite sure what you call that physical/mental malady, but he had the luxury of staying in bed until suddenly he'd say, that's not right, and he would jump out of bed and he would attend to it. Now, so you would say Donovan is always, he's either Superman, you know, in the courtroom, or he's the mild-mannered Clark Kent. And he's laying in bed and then suddenly he's Superman. Well, okay. How does he become our hero? You'd say Donovan then knew the first LDS that had come into Jackson County. He actually, at one point, the saints came to him and said, we're tired of being burned out in Jackson County. And they asked Donovan, will you defend us? And Donovan said, well, I may lose all my other clients. You pay me $5,000 to make amends for all those I'm going to lose, and I'll defend you. And sure enough, they got the money and defend us. Nevertheless, the saints were now up here. By the time they're in Clay County, and they're starting to buy the homes right next to the rich guys, And the rich guys now get together and they vote, oh, send the Mormons to hell, and if not, they're Wisconsin. Donovan at that time is representing Clay County in the Missouri legislature. Donovan had been lying in bed, okay? And suddenly he gets word via the newspaper there has been a county-wide vote, and his conclusion is that's not just. He actually knows that Mormons can trace their history back to their forefathers, fought in the Revolutionary War. They can also trace their history to a war called the War of 1812, and some of the Mormons now in Clay County had actually shown great patriotism and defended the country. Donovan's conclusion is you can't force out these settlers because they are American citizens. You can't tell them where to go, and you can't, force them out of that society. Suddenly, he throws his covers off. He runs to the legislature, then the kind of government thing. As he runs to the government, he now demands that there was what was called unincorporated land, meaning no county had claimed it in the state. Donovan now literally pushes through the legislature asking that there be a new county formed, which is right above Clay County, and it's like they're building blocks. Jackson, Clay, Caldwell, and that Caldwell be a Mormon reservation.